Hello and welcome to this session on public speaking. My name is Daudi Mugabi and today I'll be joined by Paul Kavuma. We're going to take you through public speaking. This is something that we all do in one way or the other, whether it's at work, at a family gathering, or any other space. And I believe public speaking is one of those things that helps us to become a much better communicator on a big scale. So you might be able to influence and talk to someone on a one-on-one, but how do you do that at scale? And that's what we want to learn today, how to become effective public speakers. And so before we kick off our session today, I wanted us to introduce the speakers today, and that is myself and Paul. So I'll go first and introduce myself, and then we shall have Paul introduce himself. So my name is Daudi Mugabi. By profession, I am a customer experience professional, and I have a background in marketing for over 15 years. Now, why are we doing this webinar, or why at least am I invested? It's because I have found that public speaking has been of tremendous help to me in my professional life and personal life. I've become a much better communicator and much more comfortable and confident in front of an audience. And that has helped open up opportunities for me, including getting the job that I have now. It's the power of presentation, the power of influencing others around you. And that is what we want to master today and share with you. So we'll be going through a couple of things, including body language, vocal variety, amongst others. So that's me as Daudi Mugabi. Let's hear from Paul. Paul, just let our viewers know a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Daudi, for inviting me to participate in this webinar as one of the speakers today. As you've heard from Daudi, my name is Paul Kavuma. Just a little background about me. My career is in architecture and building design. However, I have managed to not just design buildings. Nowadays, I actually sell finished buildings, and I want to focus on the word sell. The reason why I'm doing sale of real estate is simply because I have tried to learn a lot about communication and public speaking and the difference between good communicators and great communicators. And part of what we're going to be discussing today are the elements that make great public speakers different from just the good public speakers. I not only do sale of real estate and designing of buildings, but I am also a co-founder at Talk Smart Training Solutions, where we train people in public speaking and communication. So I'm more than honored and privileged to be participating in today's webinar. I hope we can get to share a lot with you and probably learn a lot from the kind of questions you'll be asking us. Thank you so much, Daudi. Looking forward to this. Let's start.
Yeah, and that's a very good segue as to why we're here. I'm sure one of the reasons as to why you decided to take on public speaking is because maybe you saw a speech that moved you. For me, I always call back to the Obama speeches and how much of an impact they had on me. So Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, those are orators who spoke to me deeply. And I was wondering how it is that they were weaving these words in a way that could emotionally move an audience. And so that's when I decided to take on public speaking. And I think that's the reason why we're here, is to analyze people like that. What is it that makes a public speaker exceptional? What is it that it takes to move an audience emotionally and get your message across to the point that they take action on whatever it is that you are saying? And so there are a variety of ways to do that, of which we're going to break down some of them. And that could include the vocal variety, basically how they say what they're saying, the techniques that they use. There is the body language. How is it that they use their body to communicate? Because communication is not just in voice, but also in body. So what do they do with their hands? What do they do with their body? How do they stand? And so on and so forth. So a speech, a good one, is more than just saying the right things. It's also saying the right things rightly, if I might put it that way. And so the first segment, or rather, if I'm to give an overview, this session is going to be broken down into segments of a good public speech. It's so vast. Public speaking is so vast, we can't cover all of it, but we just thought we'd zero down on a few areas that we feel are pertinent to executing a perfect speech, and that is vocal variety, which has many segments within it, and also body language. So for today, we're just going to focus on those two particular areas. Paul and I will share our experiences on what we've seen and what we've learned and how we can help you become a better speaker using vocal variety and your body language. So, Paul, to kick us off, we're going to start with vocal variety. Now, for someone that isn't in the realm of public speaking, how would you break down vocal variety? What exactly does that mean?
Thank you so much, Daudi. What exactly does vocal variety mean? To me, vocal variety is having a voice that is expressive. Having a voice that has a language in itself. In other words, someone should be able to listen to what you're saying, and even if they do not speak the same language that you're using, from the tone of the voice or from the volume with which you're projecting, they should be able to sense how you feel about the message you're conveying. And in brief, I can just say vocal variety is about the feeling that you have about the message that you're conveying. If you're excited about what you're saying, from the way you are using your voice, someone should be able to tell that you are excited about what you're saying. And if you are not comfortable with the message you're putting across, still from the tone of the voice, someone should be able to sense that. And if your message you're trying to portray is sad, if you're trying to share that you are facing a challenge, from the tone of your voice, we should be able to feel that you're facing a challenge. If the tone of your voice and the words that you're saying are not incongruous, then that is where the problem usually is, whereby what the audience is hearing and what the audience is visualizing are not the same thing. So to me, vocal variety is about sharing the feeling, the emotion that you as a speaker you have about the subject or the material that you're trying to put across.
Yeah, perfectly said. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's being in tandem with what we are seeing and what we are hearing. Once those two come together, then we should be influenced. And like you rightly said, even if it's a foreign language, if someone is speaking a language I've never heard, but I'm being moved, then for sure that person is executing the vocal variety to the mark. And so let's go ahead and dive in further on this vocal variety. The first bit I want us to explore is the pacing. So when it comes to pacing of a speech, at what tempo are you speaking and what sort of message are you conveying? Because sometimes that affects whether or not your message comes across. Now, naturally, we all have a baseline at which we speak, certain words per minute that we use. But when it comes to public speaking, ideally, you need to make sure that matches the message that you are conveying. Some messages need to be said in a slow and intentional way in order for the audience to digest and appreciate what you're saying. Others, you might have to be flexible and use the rate of words per minute as and when it's suitable for the story that you're telling. So, Paul, from your experience, what would you say about just pacing in general of a speech in terms of vocal variety?
Thank you, Daudi. About pacing for a speech in terms of vocal variety, I can only state a statistic in terms of the number of words per minute. In general, to be a good speaker that can easily be understood, it is said you'll need to speak about 150 to 160 words per minute. So if you target for about 150 to 160 words in a minute, that should be okay for you to pace yourself, depending on whether you're trying to speak very fast or you're trying to slow it down. The audience will not lose you. However, the human brain processes 800 words per minute. So the human brain has the power to take in 800 words per minute and not lose track of what you're saying. Now, what that means is that it's easy for the audience to get bored. If all you're aiming for is about 150 words per minute, they'll be able to listen to you while also checking their phones. They'll be able to listen to you while also talking to someone else because they have the ability to actually do that. What you should be targeting for is then trying to use your voice to entertain the audience, such that they are not only listening to the words that you're saying, but they are also trying to capture the feeling that you have about the message that you're trying to convey. And that's where pacing becomes important. You get to know where to speak fast and where to slow it down. So you can speak faster, for example, when you're excited about what you're saying and you're trying to get the audience to get excited about what you're saying, but you can also slow it down to get the audience to think about the sentence you've just shared before you move on to the next point. Or in case you're trying to create a moment of suspense in the story you're telling, you can also slow it down. So it's a technique that a good speaker must have, such that you're able to control the attention of your audience. You can gauge, now it's time for me to pick up the pace, and now it's time for me to slow it down. So the more you keep varying the pace at which you speak, the more entertaining you will be in the eyes and the ears of the audience. So for me, understanding the number of words one speaks per minute, and what that means in terms of pacing, helps your audience to remain attentive. You don't easily lose them.
Yeah, you've said that wonderfully. And just to make sure that people are following what we're saying, let's watch a clip that perfectly encapsulates what we're talking about in terms of vocal variety, with pacing in particular.
I've interviewed and portrayed people who've withstood some of the ugliest things life can throw at you. But the one quality all of them seem to share is an ability to maintain hope for a brighter morning, even during our darkest nights. So I want all the girls watching here and now to know that a new day is on the horizon. And when that new day finally dawns, it will be because of a lot of magnificent women, many of whom are right here in this room tonight, and some pretty phenomenal men fighting hard to make sure that they become the leaders who take us to the time when nobody ever has to say, "Me too," again. Thank you.
Right. So I think that clip perfectly shows what we've been trying to explain with terms of pacing itself and how that can help you engage an audience. One other technique, Paul, that I like speakers using is the power of a pause. Now, I've noticed often, particularly in our public speaking clubs, whenever someone has a powerful pause, like you say, there could be some people on phone or people who aren't paying attention. But when you pause, it's a strange thing. For some reason, that captures people's attention. The people look up, they say, "Hold on, what just happened? I was hearing words and now they've stopped." It's a very good technique of drawing the audience back in. And so some people have noticed they tend to just run through the speech with words, all the way till the end. And they do not necessarily make use of something as simple as pausing. Because from my experience and what I've seen others do, sometimes pausing is effective when you are trying to figure out what to say. Pausing is also effective when you want to make a point and make it sink into the audience's minds. Just a moment for them to think and ponder what you've just said. A pause is very effective for that. So in terms of pausing, what's your experience in that part?
In terms of pausing, it reminds me of a joke I once told when I was participating in a humorous speech contest. And the joke was only more impactful because of the pause I had placed. This was the joke. I said, "I have a very bad handwriting. In fact, usually, a friend of mine keeps making fun of it. He says, 'Paul, your handwriting is so bad. In fact, you write as if a chicken is scratching on the page.'" And my response was, "Ouch, that is so offensive to the chicken. That pause before I say to the chicken makes the audience anticipate what you're going to say next. The power of the joke there is the fact that I had to pause. Let the first sentence sink in. The fact that what he had said about my handwriting is offensive. Then the bang came after the pause when I said to the chicken. The power of pausing is important because it makes the audience suspicious about what you are going to say next. It creates a moment of anticipation. The other thing is it helps the audience digest what you've just said before the pause. It's extremely impactful and it shows that you are confident about what you are saying, as opposed to rushing through sentences. I can give another example which shows the power of pausing. I'm going to say this sentence twice, and then you will tell which delivery is more impactful. And this is the sentence. I don't know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. I could also say it this way. I don't know exactly what I am talking about, but I'm going to go ahead and just say it anyway. The way I've used pausing between different words creates impact. To a listener, one speaker sounds more persuasive, one speaker sounds more confident than the other speaker who's rushing through their words or their sentences. So pausing helps you to sound more confident as you're delivering a message. Even when you're not so sure about what you're saying, you'll sound more believable in the ears of the audience. That's the power of pausing. The other thing I can add about pausing is it helps you to breathe as you're speaking, especially when you're trying to project, in case it's a very large audience and the tool you're using, maybe it's a microphone, is not as effective. Pausing between sentences helps you to keep your voice well projected, such that you have enough air in your lungs, you breathe in and out between sentences, and then by the time you start speaking, you still have enough air in your lungs to keep your voice extremely audible. That was number 2. Then number 3, and most importantly, is that pausing is a way of punctuating your sentences. From the pause, we can tell whether you are asking a question or you have paused in the middle of a question, or you are sharing a long sentence and you're just pausing in between the sentence. The way you're punctuating. So we can tell whether it's a full stop or it's a comma or it's a question mark. That's the power of pausing. It helps the audience to punctuate the words that you are saying, as opposed to speaking like a robot non-stop. Pausing helps you to punctuate your sentences such that the audience can understand what you're saying in the exact way you intend it to be understood.
Yeah, and I think people that have mastered this that I admire are poets. Poets have a very, very good skill in terms of using pauses. They have the ability to say something in very quick succession and then pause at the right moment for that message to sink in. Because remember, they're using phrases and words that require you to be alert mentally. And so they also execute that technique of pausing at the perfect time, right for that message to get through, and then continuing with their particular statement. And I just wanted to play a clip here just to bring all this that we've said, pausing and its effectiveness, into play. So let's watch this clip. Just make sure we understand exactly what it is we're talking about and then proceed.
I had a conversation with God the other day, and I don't totally agree on the idea of love, but the idea of loving you got to be God sent because you was what I prayed for. All this bad energy from my last relationship, you was what I saged for. I mean, sex is cool, but you don't know intimacy until you get prayed on. I heard someone say talk is cheap, but these lips got expensive taste. And my appetite for love ain't subject to change. So as long as the foundation stays the same, the subject won't change.
Right. So I hope that clip has put into play the effect of pauses. And I hope you appreciate exactly what that does and how it can help you become a better communicator. Now, Paul, the last time we met, you mentioned something to me, again, in this line of vocal variety. I've forgotten what word you used, but Professor Lumumba and I think Martin Luther King use this technique when they are speaking. It's almost like singing their speech to keep people alive and awake. So what exactly is that technique? Can you just let us know?
Yes, thank you, Dowdy, for reminding me. So the word that I used that time was prosody. Prosody. It's a technique whereby the speaker exaggerates the sounds of the words that they are saying. It's a way of portraying your personality as a speaker. When you listen to Martin Luther King's speeches, he would sound something like this. I have a dream that one day our children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. It talks as if he's singing. Some say he's actually singing in his speech. That simply is what we call prosody, whereby someone's personality, someone's passion can be felt by the way he's pronouncing certain words. Certain words have triple or quadruple letters from the way he's pronouncing them. It's the same technique that Professor P.L. Lumumba uses in his speeches. When he says the problem of Africa is that we reward bad leaders with another term in office, you can still feel the prosody. He exaggerates certain words. So prosody is about creating a certain personality, whereby two different people can read the same sentence, but you can tell the difference in the way they are reading it simply by the way they are pronouncing certain words. Certain words have more weight than others. It's still the same technique you'll hear Barack Obama using. Specifically, the speech I like, since you pointed out Barack Obama at some point when you are introducing today's message. When you listen to Barack Obama's speech in Boston, I think it was Boston, he was still a senator for Illinois, and he was campaigning for some other presidential candidate. To me, that still is the best speech Barack Obama has ever delivered. He used a lot of prosody. He pronounced certain words with a lot of weight, and we could tell that he was extremely passionate about what he was saying. There were not very many pauses in his words, but prosody helped the audience to sit and listen to a very long speech of about 25 minutes without getting tired, because it's as if he was singing through his speech. And for me, that's what prosody is about. It creates a personality of the speaker.
Yeah, I agree. And in everything we've said, that last phrase of yours, the personality of the speaker, I think it's important for people to know that you can't sound like everyone. You can only sound like yourself. So the idea here is for you to go out and practice and find what technique, what measure or method of speaking works best for you. And then you perfect that, because you can't just wake up and now start sounding like Martin Luther King or Professor Lumumba just because you like the way they do. That's their personality. And you too have something unique to bring to the table. So you can leverage some of their techniques, but I would encourage everyone to try and come up with their own, as opposed to copying or emulating other people, because we're different and we have different strengths Others are good with vocal variety. Others just writing the speech itself. Others body language. So whatever strength you have, use it to the best of your ability and find yourself by practicing over and over again. And just to wrap up the segment of vocal variety, let's watch that clip, Paul, that you spoke about of Barack Obama's speech, and let's appreciate some of the execution in terms of the prosody that you mentioned.
Now, even as we speak, there are those who are preparing to divide us. The spin masters, the negative ad peddlers, who embrace the politics of anything goes. Well, I say to them tonight, there is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
Right. So having seen that clip and appreciated vocal variety, let's move on to body language. As we mentioned earlier, speech is made up of so many things. You speak with your voice, you also speak with your body. And when you merge these two perfectly well, you come up with an extraordinary speech. Now, in the professional world, most people that I have seen tend to stand behind a lectern and deliver their speeches. So they don't necessarily have the opportunity to do a lot with their body. But still, there is an opportunity there for you to execute your speech using your body. That could be with your hands, it could be with your facial expressions, and so on and so forth. So, Paul, I'm going to hand over to you to just let us know what are some of the techniques that we can use to deliver a speech using our body. So body language, what is that all about?
Body language, what is that all about? Someone once said, we speak with our mouths in terms of sharing the words that our thoughts are trying to depict, but we communicate with our eyes, we communicate with our hands, we communicate with our body, with the arms, with the chest, with the feet. And so for me, body language is about understanding what your body is communicating. The words coming out of your mouth might be saying something, but your hands and your eyes and your facial expression in general might be communicating a different thing altogether. The importance of understanding body language is to make sure that what your words are saying are in tandem with what your body is saying. They are all communicating the same thing. And usually that's where the challenge is. Because at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is to act out what we are thinking. Or we're trying to act out what we are saying. If to the audience, what they are seeing or what you're acting out does not match the words that you're saying, then there are question marks that will arise. They'll start to either doubt what you're saying, or they'll doubt the feeling that you have for what you are saying. Yet, if you're trying to be a good speaker, if you're trying to be a speaker that is persuasive, a speaker that is believable, you really want your audience to believe in what you're saying. And the best way of doing that is by making sure what you're acting out in terms of body language is in line with what you want your audience to believe. There is a statistic that close to 55% of any message that we deliver as speakers, 55% is summarized in what your body is saying. The remaining percentage, 38% of it, goes to the use of the voice, which we had just been discussing earlier, and then 7% goes to the choice of words. In other words, when you're watching someone speaking, a lot of the questions that you have in mind are answered by the way they're acting it out. How far they're standing from you, how they are using their hands, whether they're smiling or not, whether they're maintaining eye contact or not, where they are pointing, or whether they're even hiding their hands. A lot of that has a lot to say about the person and how they feel about the message they are trying to put across. And that's why body language is extremely important in communication and public speaking.
Yeah, I agree with that, Paul. And I just wanted to highlight a few examples that I've seen during my experience, particularly with the public speaking clubs at Toastmasters and the various speakers that I've seen there. In many cases, you have a stage that is quite big, and your speech might require you to make a few movements just to maximize the use of the stage. And sometimes you'll find people taking a step to the right or a step to the left, but it's not in tandem with what they're saying. Maybe they're talking about a journey and they stand still when they said, I moved from this stage to that stage. That would have been an opportunity for them to literally walk. That sort of manifests the speech in life. We can see what you are saying. And that I think is a powerful way of using your bodies to project what you are saying physically for us to see. Be that through gestures like you're saying with the hands, be that through facial expressions, and also the tone of voice like we had mentioned earlier. All those, when they're wrapped up in one, they convey the message much stronger than when you don't take advantage. And so I think that's one area that I feel when people are rehearsing their speeches, they don't pay too much attention to, and yet it's important, because every time you point, every time you raise your hands to do this, every step you take to the right or to the left or to the front or to the back, there must be purpose behind that. It must be adding value to what you're saying, and not just doing it for the sake of doing it, because in some scenarios it might become distracting, especially if you keep moving to the left, you keep moving to the right, you keep moving to the left, you keep moving to the right. It becomes disorienting. And so I would like to urge everyone that's watching today is to keep that in mind. Try and make sure that any bit of movement by your body is intentional and that it is adding value to your speech. Always have that at the back of your mind. And another thing that I'd like to add is your, can I call it a default stance? You know, when you're not moving, how do you stand? Where are your hands? For most people, I'm seated right now, but they tend to have their hands either at their chest or close to them. And some people deliver a whole speech just like that. Others have them at the side of their body, and the whole speech goes just like that. So I would urge people, maybe from my experience, and Paul, you can share your thoughts, to have them at the side, because here you are, well, ready to go with your hands moving, as opposed to having them here where they might be tempted to stay throughout your speech. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Paul, and whether or not you've noticed it in some speakers.
Yes, I have noticed, and it's important to know generally what your body is doing at any one point in time when you're speaking. Because there are usually three things you're trying to achieve in understanding your body language. First of all, you want to make sure that you show the audience that you are comfortable. That you're comfortable being in front of them. You're comfortable with the message that you're sharing. Secondly, you want to show the audience that you are a likable person. Okay? That you're a nice person. You're entertaining. You're entertaining. That you're not going to bore them. And third and lastly is you want to show the audience that you care about what you are talking about. You care. And that's what I want to emphasize. The caring part of your message can best be expressed in the way you use your body. It's not enough to say, that was the worst day of my life. It doesn't show the feeling that you have about the message. You should think about what your face is doing and what your hands are trying to portray. That to me was the worst day of my life. Just by putting the hand to the heart and saying that was the worst day of my life. We can almost feel that emotion because you've gone ahead to show that you care. You care about how you want the audience to perceive you. You care about the message you're putting across. I can express a different emotion. Again, if I said something like, "Thank you for being a wonderful audience. I've enjoyed having this session with you." From my facial expression, you don't feel the excitement. You don't feel as if I mean what I'm saying. I could also put it this way. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. I feel like I have enjoyed this day simply because I got to meet each and every one of you today. Thank you so much. It also shows that you care. You care about the words coming out of your mouth. So it's important to show the audience that you care about the message. Show them. Don't just say it. Show them. Are you angry? Show them. Are you excited? Show them. Show them with your hands. Show it with your facial expression. Show it with the movement of the body. You have to show it. It goes a long way because it sticks in the audience's mind longer. They may forget the exact words that you use, but they won't forget the impact that you've had on their feelings. They won't forget the feeling that you've evoked within them simply by using this non-verbal communication that we call body language.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for that elaborate explanation on using body language. And I noticed one thing, and I think it's an important point for all of us to notice, is when you're giving the two examples, one where you're not using your body language and one where you're using your body language, I noticed one thing. When you are using your gestures or your body language, the vocal variety came into play. And it really helped to emphasize the points that you're making. When you say, "It was a hard day for me," you know, the inflection of the voice and the movement of the body came together to make the point much better than it would have done without that. So vocal variety and body language move hand in hand. And in most cases, you'll find that whenever you're making a gesture, there's an inflection of the voice. The voice changes with every gesture that you make to help emphasize that point. So I wanted us to just take note of that these things that we're talking about, they move hand in hand. They're not necessarily independent of each other. So, Paul, I don't know if there are any other things you wanted to add on body language in particular.
Thank you, Daudi. I just want to pick it up from where you've left off. That the way you're moving your hands, the way you're using your facial expressions can actually even affect the inflection in your voice. And that is true. You've heard of the feeling, you've heard of the saying that you fake it till you make it. In this case, when it comes to communication, it's about faking it till you feel it, if I may put it that way. In other words, your body language can affect the way you're feeling about any situation. But also, your feeling can affect your body language. If I had two options and I had to pick one, I would choose using my body language to affect my feeling. Because that means I'd have to plan and prepare how I'm going to behave in a certain situation. For example, if you have noticed how actors take a lot of time preparing, they are given a script in advance, but it's not enough to memorize the words. They take a lot of time to get into character, simply because you are supposed to look and sound authentic. And that's the power of body language. You are supposed to look and also sound the part. A certain writer once wrote that we are all actors. Life is a theater and we are all actors. However, the roles go to those who have perfected the character they're trying to act out. So when you're doing public speaking, you're also performing in a way. You're acting out the message in a way. So it's important that the behaviors that you choose are those that are adding value to the message that you are saying. That means there are certain actions that don't add value to what you're saying, but are instead taking away from the power of your message. We may not go so much into detail right now, but I can just highlight that everyone has those small actions that they do, most times subconsciously, which have a message that they are sending out to the audience. Much as you're not aware of it, it sends a message to the audience. If you're speaking and you keep adjusting your clothes, adjusting your necktie, or if you speak and you keep rubbing the back of your neck as you're saying what you're saying, to the audience, it feels as if you are not comfortable. It shows that you're not comfortable. Now they may start to ask, are you not comfortable with what you're saying? In other words, are you not sure about what you're saying? Or you're simply nervous about standing in front of the audience? Those are the questions that start coming up in the mind of the audience. That's why it's important to know what your body is doing as you're speaking. What are my hands doing? Am I readjusting my clothes? Am I trying to scratch something at the back of my head, which has nothing to do with the words I'm saying? When you're aware about the things that your body does, you're able to control it. You're able to know where to look. You're able to know how to use your hands, such that whatever movement you make is adding value to the message you're putting across. That's the power of hand gestures, knowing what your hands are doing. The moment your hands start moving, they should move in such a way that they're emphasizing the point you're trying to put across. In terms of maybe direction, in terms of maybe sizes of things, your hands should be emphasizing what you are saying. And the more you get used to using your hands to emphasize what you're saying, the more comfortable you will look in the eyes of your audience, the more confident you will look in the eyes of your audience. And these qualities help you to come off as believable in terms of the message you're trying to put across. There's this thing called a gut feeling. People who are usually in sales or persuasive speaking have what we call a gut feeling from the way someone is presenting or from the way someone is trying to sell themselves or selling an item. You can have a gut feeling that they are not telling the truth or they're hiding some information. Now, that thing called the gut feeling is because you've sensed something in their body language. You may not even be able to point it out and say, why are you biting your lip? Why are you scratching your back? Why you are readjusting your coat? You may not even notice it that much, but your body will pick it up. You look at them and you will get this gut feeling that maybe they are not sure about what they're saying. Maybe they're hiding something. Maybe they're not telling the truth. So that gut feeling is highly influenced by what your body is saying, not the words that you're speaking. The words might have been scripted and you've taken enough time to rehearse them and memorize them. No problem with the words. The body, which contributes 55% of our communication, the body may be saying something totally different. That's why it's important to know what your hands are doing in line with what your message is. Also, I just want to add this, the facial expressions. The facial expressions are actually influenced by about 43 muscles on our faces. There are about 43 muscles on our faces that play a big role in our facial expressions. And there are certain universal facial expressions which, regardless of the language you're speaking, whether you're speaking Italian, French, German, Russian, or English, or Zulu, or Luganda, or Swahili, name it, there are certain universal facial expression for the human species, whereby even if someone doesn't understand the words you're saying, by looking at you, they can tell, one, whether you're happy or whether you're sad. Those are universal. Those are universal facial expressions. Whether you're disgusted about what someone has said, whether you have a feeling of contempt, whether you have anger, whether it's fear, or excitement. Those are about seven universal facial expressions, which don't need words, but just the eyes, the movement of your eyebrows, and the movement of your lips. And that is where there was a certain presidential debate where Mitt Romney was debating with Barack Obama. Good as Barack Obama was at that time, some say in that particular presidential debate he actually lost, simply because he spent most of his time taking notes about what Mitt Romney was saying and making notes about what he was going to say next, which was something new. People had never seen Obama do that. Usually when someone is speaking, he's either looking at them, he's maintaining eye contact, or his hands are placed where you can see them. But this time the hands were hidden by the lectern and he was spending a lot of the time looking down. He lacked eye contact. His facial expressions were off, and that said a lot about how he had not prepared for that particular presidential debate. Probably it's one of the clips we may have to share, but that says a lot about the power that your body can have in conveying a message. Not just the words, but the body. Back to you.
Thank you, thank you so much, Paul. I think you've wrapped that up very well. And let's have a clip that you've just mentioned there of Barack Obama, and then we'll quickly follow that clip with another one showing the right thing to do. So an example of someone that's using their body language to the best of their ability in a way that conveys their message and helps the audience connect with them.
Within the first 3 minutes, the performance was flat. And that's really what everybody's commenting on, is just how flat the performance was, how unenergetic and very uncharacteristic. We're used to seeing someone that's very dynamic, very charismatic, very open, and that just wasn't there.
In your experience, when you see such a dramatic change in an individual, what usually underlies that change?
Well, that's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with concerns and worry. You know, when we see that tension in the face, when we see those compressed lips, when we see the lack of eye contact, which we saw a lot of, there's either too much going on in the brain or there's too much concern. And I think all those negative emotions were very much present there.
But one of my students, a freshman named Charlotte, was not convinced. Charlotte was very good at writing lists, but she refused to write any poems. Miss, she'd say, I'm just not interesting. I don't have anything interesting to say. So I assigned her list after list, and one day I assigned the list 10 things I should have learned by now. Number 3 on Charlotte's list was, I should have learned not to crush on guys 3 times my age. I asked her what that meant, and she said, Miss, it's kind of a long story. And I said, Charlotte, it sounds pretty interesting to me. So she wrote her first poem, a love poem, unlike any I had ever heard before. And the poem began, Anderson Cooper is a gorgeous man.
Well, I hope those 2 clips have helped you appreciate how to use your body well, and also understand that public speaking in general is a combination of a variety of things. Number 1, your vocal variety. Number 2, the use of your body. And when it comes to expressing yourself, particularly the body, remember to also infuse that with emotion and vocal variety. That will help you deliver your speech to the best of your ability. And so with that said, we've come to the end of the webinar, but we're not going to close it just yet. Obviously, we've had a number of questions come in. And in fact, if you do have some more questions you'd like to share with us, please put those on the chat. We'll be able to read them out. And so we're going to begin going through the questions one by one. And just here, let me go through. Let's see what questions we have ready for us here. Right. So the first question comes from Sharon, who says, can you provide specific examples of how varying pitch can impact audience engagement during a presentation? I think we had touched on this, Paul, but just to answer Sharon, maybe you can summarize it.
How can varying of the pitch impact audience engagement? Now, this one reminds me about the importance of having dialogue in any communication you're trying to share with your audience, especially in storytelling. When you have a story with one character and the character is given a plot, usually when there are moments of excitement, in your voice, as you're portraying, as you're trying to create or paint pictures in the mind of the audience, in your voice, you should be able to change that to show excitement. He saw what he had never expected to see in his life. A vast ocean, bordered by a lot of green, a lot of flowers, beautiful trees. That is something that he thought he would never meet along his journey. But all of a sudden, he woke up. It was just a dream. It was just a dream. Now, just by changing, at one point I was showing excitement, then all of a sudden, the mood changed. Those are moments that engage the audience's mind. Just by changing the tone of the voice, people start to paint different pictures. You evoke different emotions and feelings within the audience, and it keeps them engaged. Storytelling is powerful. It's a powerful tool, and it can best be utilized if you're able to use your voice to engage the mind of the audience.
Right. Thank you, Paul. I have nothing else to add to that. I think you've perfectly explained it in terms of the inflection, at what key points you stretch the pitch and tone of your voice to engage the audience. Right. So our next question comes from Frida. Frida asks, how can someone practice modulating their speech rate without it sounding unnatural?
How can you practice modulating the rate of your speech without sounding unnatural? I'm going to just share what I usually do. I usually record myself while speaking. Whether I'm presenting or whether I'm rehearsing, I first record myself, then listen to myself. Then when I'm listening to myself, I can evaluate what I should change, what I should improve, what I should maintain. So usually you have to use these gadgets, phones, tablets, computers, laptops, name it. Use them to record your voice. Remember, I'm saying record your voice, not the video. But if you're focusing on the voice, record the voice. And then plug in earphones and listen to yourself speaking. You will know there are certain words you could have pronounced better. You will know there are certain sentences you have to speak a little slower and some a little faster. You will know just by how it will make you feel, because that is the exact way the audience will perceive it. So focus on how that sound makes you feel, and then you keep recording yourself. With time, it will come off as natural because you have rehearsed. So I rehearse usually by recording myself. And that is different from rehearsing by reading a script or memorizing a script. Because people will tell what she's saying or what he is sharing is something they memorized. They can tell. But you have to rehearse by recording your voice, such that you can tell what you have to speak differently and how you can improve it or maintain it.
Yeah, just to add to that, Paul, I would also encourage people to share their speech with other people. In fact, in other words, deliver that speech in front of somebody else. So once you've done the recording and now you're comfortable with how you're delivering your speech, present it to somebody and get their feedback, because your perception of your speech might be different from someone else. Someone else might highlight or point out something that maybe you didn't pick up. They might say, on this part, you were a bit robotic. Maybe you need to work on that. Something perhaps you didn't pick up on. So I think at the end of the day, it's about practice and being intentional about how you deliver your speech. So record it, listen to it, make sure that you are hitting all the right notes, and then present it to somebody else and get their feedback. And after that, I think you can do that to the audience. That would be my response to that. So the questions are really flying in here. We have another one here from Andrew. So Andrew asks, what are some tips for maintaining confident posture, especially when feeling nervous? So how do you fake it till you make it, to answer your earlier point?
How do you fake it till you make it? First of all, you have to make sure the way you're standing should not be distracting the audience. Some people stand while leaning, especially if there's something for you to lean on, a lectern, a podium. Standing while leaning on the podium, to the audience, you'll come off as uncomfortable. Standing while not well balanced, whereby your weight is not well balanced on both feet. And that will force you to keep moving your weight from one foot to another, and that can be distracting. So the body movement should not be distracting to the audience. To the audience, you should look comfortable. So avoid distracting body movements. That means if you're going to stand, stand. Don't lean or don't hold onto anything. If you're going to stand, stand. If you're going to move, move. Move if it adds value to what you are saying. So if you're going to move, move. But make sure that movement is adding value to what you're saying. So to answer your question in one word, purposeful. The movements you have to make have to be purposeful. In other words, you must have almost thought about them before you even show up to present. Think about, where should I stand? How should I move? Where should I stand? How should I move? What should my hands do? If you've thought about this, it's easy for you to know what your hands are doing, what your body is doing, where your feet are facing at any one point when you're speaking, because you are aware of it. So make sure any movement you make is purposeful. It's adding value to what you're saying. It's not distracting the audience.
And just to add to that, it will go back to the earlier questions, which is practice, 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 practice. There's no one who gets on stage and they have no nerves. Even the best speakers in the world have nerves. But I think the difference between them and the beginners is they have practiced so many times to the point that they overcome those nerves once they begin delivering their speech. So Andrew, if you're nervous, just practice and become confident and comfortable in your speech. And then when the time comes, just deliver that speech to the best of your ability. The more practice you put in, the more it will show in the presentation, and definitely you will stand out in that way. Okay, so another question here from Patricia. Patricia asks, how can a speaker ensure their facial expressions align with the message they are conveying? I think, Paul, you had answered this one in terms of the emotion, feeling it, as you said, but maybe you have one or two other words to add to that.
Okay, first of all, it's very hard to use your body to communicate something that is not authentic. It's very hard to make your body lie. It's easy to lie with the words you're saying. It's easy to say, I'm having a good day. It's easy to say, it was good to see you today. It's easy to say something that you don't mean. It's hard to make your body say something that you don't mean. Now, why it's important to know this is because you have to rehearse your body language. It takes time for you, especially if you're going to present a speech where you've been informed you're going to present this speech for 30 minutes. You've been informed well in advance. Use the time you've been given, 2 weeks in advance, 3 weeks in advance. Use that time to focus a lot on body language. Someone once said, if I have 10 days to prepare a speech, I'll use 3 days to write the script and then 7 days to practice my body language. That's how important it is. So you have to prepare, you have to plan, you have to know, in case I'm telling a joke, what should my face be doing? In case the story is sad, what should my face be doing? In case I'm pointing to someone in the audience, how should I point? Should I point like this? Should I point this way? Or should I point this way? All those have different connotations. They are all perceived differently in the eyes of your audience. So you have to rehearse. You have to prepare. Prepare your body such that any movement you make in terms of gestures or in terms of facial expressions, any movement you make should be authentic. There is what they call the Merabian rule. I hinted on it earlier, whereby your feelings about any subject are usually portrayed by the Merabian rule. 7% can be picked up on the words that you're using. 38% of your feelings can be picked up on the voice, the tonality, and 55% of what you feel about what you're saying can be picked up on body language. That is the gestures and facial expressions. 55%. That's the biggest percentage of your feelings about what you're saying can be picked up on just looking at your body language. So that's why it's important to spend a lot of your time preparing your body language, not just the words that you're going to use.
Oh, I don't think I have anything to add to that. You've answered the question perfectly. Let's move along. There's one here from Martin. Martin asks, how can a speaker determine the appropriate balance between using gestures and over-gesturing?
Over-gesturing. I think the word here is theatrical. Sometimes you don't want to appear theatrical. You don't want to, because you're being told to use gestures, doesn't mean you have to be gesturing, moving your hands all the time. No. The gesturing has to be emphasizing something. And so don't move your hands unless you feel you have to emphasize something. You have to look at it that way. Your hands are either trying to point, they're either trying to elaborate something your hands that your words have failed to elaborate. Your hands should be assisting you. They are a tool. They should be assisting you to elaborate something that your words have not been able to put across. So they should be emphasizing. They should not be used together with the words. It shouldn't be crammed that your hands should be moving all the time. They should be emphasizing something.
Yeah, I agree 100%. If it's not complementing the speech itself, then there's no need for it. Sometimes your speech does not necessarily need all the gestures in the world. Those gestures should just add a little bit of flavor or spice to the speech as and when required, not necessarily all the time. So thank you for that. Moving on to the next question, there is one here from Agnes. And thank you so much for everyone sending in the questions. We really appreciate your feedback, and this shows that you've really enjoyed and grasped what we're saying. So a question here from Agnes: could you give examples of suggestive gestures and explain their impact on the audience? I think this one was answered by yourself, Paul, during our session, but maybe you can just wrap it up for Agnes to appreciate.
Okay, there are quite a number of gestures. I had earlier even highlighted those that you might want to avoid. Now, let me focus on those that you might want to enhance or to use more often when you are in a speech or when you're presenting or when you're in a meeting. Now, there are certain gestures that you can use to control the room. To control the room. For example, if I am conducting a Q&A session, physically, there are members in the room, some are raising hands. You could say, let's raise our hands in case we have questions. I'll be able to point at you to let you know that you're the one giving us the next question. And when you're done speaking, please sit down and let someone else raise their hand, and I'll also be able to signal to them to stand up and speak. Now, those are gestures to control the room. I've told them how to raise their hands without saying this is how you're going to do it, but I've demonstrated. You'll be raising your hands, and I'll be signaling you when it's your turn to speak. Meaning, when I do this, I've pointed at someone that's going to speak next. But those are not the exact words I've used. But I've said, when I do this, that means I'm signaling you to stand up and speak. So those are gestures to control the room. Now, there are certain gestures you can also use to move your audience's attention to something, either something you're holding or something that is being displayed. When I'm talking while looking at a flip chart, if there was a flip chart next to me, or if I was holding an object, every time I speak about the object, I'll have to speak while pointing to the object or pointing to the lectern, for as long as what I'm saying is being displayed on the lectern. Though that gesture sends the attention away from you and it draws the attention to what you're pointing at. When you're done using the object, or when you're done displaying what you want to display and you want the attention to be focused back on you, then you stop pointing at this and then you start speaking with your hands, but without pointing to whatever you're pointing at. So these are gestures to show where the attention should be focused. Now, the other gesture can be in terms of when you're trying to persuade. When you're trying to persuade, there are certain gestures you want to use and there are certain gestures you do not want to use. If you've noticed, most people, when they're trying to appear friendly and warm, they take on the open palm gesture. Every time you open up your palms, it's as if you're saying, I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to hide. You're most welcome. This is a gesture you use when you're trying to invite someone in. You're most welcome. So it's an open palm gesture. It shows that you're friendly, you're warm, you're kind, you have nothing to hide. As opposed to using the palms facing you. Okay, if every time I'm illustrating, I'm doing this, or if my palms are closed this way, clenching the fists, this usually shows you're not comfortable. Clenching the fists or having your palms pointing towards yourself all the time, it shows that you're not comfortable or that you're nervous or that you're hiding something. I would encourage you, instead of closing your palms, let your palms be open to the audience. It shows you're more welcoming, you're more friendly. And usually politicians do this a lot, just to create an impression that they are friendly and they are welcoming and they are warm. This third one is something you have to use only in moments where you're trying to remind people that you have authority. It's called steeple. This is a power gesture. Anytime you see someone doing this, that shows they have power in the room. It shows they have authority. It's usually used by bosses when they are speaking to subordinates. They take on that gesture. It's only effective when you're speaking to subordinates, or if you want to be perceived as someone speaking to subordinates. If you want to speak to teammates, don't appear authoritative. Open up your palms. Illustrate with your palms wide open, such that you appear more friendly, not authoritative. So those are a few gestures you might want to consider when you're speaking. Maybe one last one is what we call gesturing out of your body frame. Everyone has a body frame. Some body frames are slimmer than others, others are wider. Try to gesture within your body frame, especially if you're having intimate conversations with two other people. So if you're in a group of 3 or 4 people, your gestures should not go way out of your body frame, because then you'll be taking up space, other people's personal space, and this is not your space. Then it will be looked at as an attack. They may get defensive. If you're trying to persuade, they won't buy into what you're selling. For you to appear more persuasive and friendly, try to gesture within your body frame. If it's an intimate setting, if it's a round table discussion, when it's you talking to other 2 people. However, if you're in front of the audience and you have all this space to yourself, I would instead encourage you to gesture out of your body frame once in a while, such that you appear more confident. That is if you have more space to yourself. When you're in front of an audience of 2,000 people, you can gesture out of your body frame. You appear more confident when you do that.
Paul, let's move on to the next question. Oh, it comes from someone called Paul, your namesake. And Paul asks, how can vocal variety and body language be adapted for virtual presentations versus in-person settings? So what role does body language have when it's virtual? Is it even required? I think that's what Paul is asking.
Is it even required? That's a good question. Now, it depends on really what setting you are adopting for that particular conversation or that particular meeting. If it's one like this, whereby your camera frame only requires to show the part above your elbow, then you might want to focus a lot more on what your facial expressions are doing. If you're told that the camera frame should capture right from the knees all the way up to the tip of your hair, then you want to make sure your movement of the elbows fits within the body frame. Sorry, fits within the camera frame. That means even the gestures will be extremely important. So it comes to what's the required setting for that particular interaction. Do they want to see mainly your facial expressions? If they want to see that, then the movement of your hands, which is outside the camera frame, may not add too much value to what you're saying. If I'm speaking and you can't see what my hands are doing, it won't add value. But if you need to display your hands, make sure it's within the camera frame that has been asked of you. Then audio, if it's strictly audio, if you're calling in just to ask a question, or if you're making a submission and people don't need to see your face, maybe they have told you make sure your camera is off, but you have to speak so they can hear you, but they don't have to see you. That means you have to focus a lot of the energy on vocal variety. That means it's important on how well you place your pauses. It's important that you think about the inflection in your voice, whether the last word you're speaking has a high pitch or a low pitch. It's important that you focus a lot of the energy on the words that you're saying and how you're saying them, and not what the hands are doing. So it's about really the setting that's required of you in that particular meeting.
Wow, thank you so much, Paul, for that question. A brilliant question, one that was outside the box. I don't know if, Paul, that was you sending in that question as a proxy or something like that. It was a very good one, very stimulating indeed. We're running short on time, so let me quickly run through the remaining questions, starting with one here from Sheila. Sheila asks, what are the common mistakes speakers make with vocal variety, and how can they be avoided? Again, Paul, I feel like we had answered this question. For me, one that really stands out is just being flat throughout the speech. A common mistake made is you just say it in the same tone throughout. That's one of the most common vocal variety mistakes I've seen personally. And so there's a need for you to be aware of your ability to vary your pitches, volumes, pacing, and so on as you deliver your speech. Paul, maybe you have something else to add to that.
I'm only going to share the mistakes that I usually make and I noticed them later on, regarding vocal variety especially. Usually, we forget that this voice that we have is an instrument. It's like a musical instrument. Someone once said, imagine someone is playing a piano and they're pressing the same key. There's someone else singing the song, but the pianist is pressing only one key on the keyboard through the entire 4-minute song. That would sound extremely weird. And yet that's what we do with this instrument called the voice. There's someone singing, in other words, there are certain words coming out of the lips. There are certain words that our minds are helping us to share with the audience, but this instrument is playing the same key. If it's a piano, it's the same key. If it's a guitar, you're strumming the same string. You're playing the same tone the whole time. And yet, for you to be more memorable, for you to capture the audience's attention even more, you should be able to move from one tone to another, from one pitch to another. That's usually the mistake I make. I forget. You have to change. And the reason why you have to change is because you're trying to evoke a feeling. You're not acting for the sake of it. No, you're evoking a feeling. So you continuously have to ask your audience, what feeling do I want the audience to feel? Wow, how do I want the audience to feel as I'm saying this? How do I want the audience to feel as I'm saying this? How do I want the audience to feel as I'm saying this? So the more you ask yourself a question, the more you'll be forced to say certain words in a certain way. The more you will be forced to enunciate certain words. We talked about prosody. We talked about varying the volume. We talked about varying the pitch. These will start to come naturally for as long as you're focusing on the audience. How do I want the audience to feel about what I am saying? So for me, that's a mistake I usually make. I forget that I'm playing an instrument and I have to play all the different tunes, all the different keys. And that's the mistake we should all be aware of, such that we try to avoid it.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Let's have 2 more questions and then we close the Q&A session. We have one here from Daniel. Daniel asks, can you recommend resources or exercises for improving vocal variety and body language outside formal training? So I think he's looking for something to practice at home in order to improve his vocal variety and body language. Do you have anything to recommend, Paul?
The best thing I can recommend is joining a Toastmasters club. Whenever someone mentions practice out of formal training, a Toastmasters club is a safe space whereby you show up with all this information you have about public speaking and then you try it out in front of an audience, a live audience. But what makes it safe is that there's no one that's going to ridicule you in case you make a mistake. There's no one that's going to laugh at you in case you make an error. People are instead going to encourage you and they're going to give you feedback on how to improve. So if you want to practice, show up at a Toastmasters meeting, sign up as a member, and then start delivering speeches there. The more you deliver speeches, the better you'll become, because it's a skill, just like riding a bicycle, just like driving a car, just like swimming. The more you do it, the better you'll become. So it's not enough to read about it. Get in front of a live audience and keep practicing. The best way to do that is join a Toastmasters club near you.
Yes, and I'll double down on that by saying Toastmasters, like you rightly said, Paul, its benefit is giving you a live audience to have that feedback. So if you're a professional and you have a speech, a keynote speech that you want to deliver, if you're part of a Toastmasters club, you can practice that keynote speech and see what parts does your humor hit on, where do you connect with the audience emotionally, how can you improve? And by the time you deliver that keynote to the right audience or the intended audience, you've simulated that particular speech and seen how best you can deliver it. And not only that, Toastmasters also has resources online. So it's not about meeting in a physical space and delivering speeches. They have materials that you can read of their database on their website to help you improve in a myriad of spaces. So many ways you can learn how to become a better speaker. So like Paul has rightly said, Toastmasters is a very good platform to join. Right, let's now get our final question, because I'm seeing here we're being pressed on time, and we respect your time. We'd like you to depart at the time we promised. Final question comes from Nora, and Nora asks, how can someone receive constructive feedback on their use of vocal variety and body language during presentations? I think this is a question which we've literally just answered, and that would be Toastmasters. That's the best platform to do that. So, Paul, unless you have anything else to say, I believe the answer is Toastmasters.
Yes, when it comes to feedback, Toastmasters is the best place you can. It's the best space you can be in, whereby you can deliver a speech and you get feedback in real time about how well you've done and how you can improve. So join a Toastmasters club near you and get to learn ways in which you can improve your speech delivery.
Yes, and I'll just conclude by saying, just Google Toastmasters Uganda. There are a number of clubs that we have here in the country, depending on where you stay or where you work. Also on your schedule, they meet on different days and different times. So try and find one that is suitable for you. And then that will be your first step to becoming the speaker that you are meant to be. I would like to thank each and everyone that has joined us today. We're seeing the questions are so many. We can't go through all of them. But in case you'd like to engage us further, we're going to put this on the screen. As you can see there, those are our contacts. You can reach us by emailing us at contact@daudimogabi.com or talksmart.trainingsolutions@gmail.com. So those are there on the screen. We have your email addresses. That is how you got this webinar. We shall be able to send you our information, or you can be able to reach out to us and engage us further. But we would like to thank you so much for joining us today. And hopefully you've learned something new with vocal variety, with the use of the body language. And we look forward to having more of these sessions in the future and engaging you further. Please invite us to your speeches. If you have any, would like to see you deliver your speech and maybe give feedback where we can. This program is meant to help us produce better speakers in the country and the world over, depending on where you're calling in from or dialing in from. So thank you very much. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us on this session. And we wish each and every one of you a lovely morning, a lovely day, a lovely evening, depending on the time. Thank you so much.